Today I'm with Tom Badenoch. Tom is from Ottawa and an HO scale model railroader, and I thought I'd drop by and have a look at his layout today. This layout's quite something. It's built on 2 different levels within a fairly small space, so I was kind of curious there, Tom, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the background of your layout.
What I'm modeling here, Chris, is a CNR branch line set in the early 60s. It's not based on any particular prototype, but designed around what I call plausible reality. The story of the layout is that it starts close to civilization at the south end, interchanges with both CP and CNR, and works its way north. The industries towards the south tend to be more manufacturing oriented and established industries. The track work is more generous. The minimum radius is 24 inches. Once I get up past Shawtown here, though, and heading for the northern half of the layout, the industry is transformed into largely resource-based industries. The curves get tighter, and the nature of the traffic flow changes significantly.
I can see, by the way you've designed it, you've done quite a job in thinking about keeping operations in mind. Can you tell me a little bit about the operational concept? Yeah.
So some raw materials, all your fuels, manufactured goods are coming up from the south. What's coming down from the north end of the railway are more finished goods, finished lumber products. There's minerals coming out. We have gravel coming out. We have lumber products coming out. So more of the raw materials feeding their way south. Most traffic is end-to-end, but I have a couple of industries that are large consumers of empty boxcars, so that almost any boxcar that comes on the layout full will end up stopping on one of those sites to pick up a load before it heads out south.
And looking at the design of it to accomplish this, it's on a point-to-point kind of construct.
Absolutely,
right?
It's a point-to-point railway.
Yeah.
We have staging at both ends at the 2 levels. But yeah, I found that if you want, it's very hard on a 2-level layout to connect the 2 levels anyway without 2 helixes, which I didn't have room for. And truly branch lines operated point to point. The diesels happily go in both directions. It means that very often crews have got to run around the trains at a point in their schedule to head back in the other direction.
When you look at operational concept, then how many people does it usually take to operate your layout?
I can have a good session with 6 people. That typically means that all the major yards and trains have a crew member assigned. We have a couple of through unit trains, 1 passenger, 1 ore, and they'll be done when someone's got a fair 15 minutes.
I see. And do you have, when you're going along the railroad, and you mentioned that you have certain spots where there's yards, I guess that causes a bit of interest in terms of a point-to-point when you've got out and back trains and they're meeting in these
Correct.
locations?
So in particularly the through trains, we run the ore train as low priority. He can be made to wait, but the passenger train hits town with priority. The local yard master is required to clear track as quickly as possible to facilitate the passenger train's getting on about its business.
So when you designed your concept, roughly how many trains do you have built into a session?
There's about 8 or 9 trains that we run. As I say, for most of the yards have a dedicated, the 2 yards have a dedicated operator, 1 industry has a dedicated operator, and then I've got about 3 trains that I assign an operator to.
What is the train length roughly when you're putting that together?
Train lengths can get up to 20 cars on the major freight coming out of CN, coming up here into Shawtown where it's broken up. But then there can be as many as 15 or 18 cars leaving here going north, hitting the major resource industries up there.
It's a substantial number of cars. The rolling stock that you move in a period represents about how many pieces of rolling stock when you're
I
doing a
probably
session?
move 80 to 90 pieces in a session.
Yeah.
As much as in real life, you probably dropped a car off and left it there for a couple of days. Other than leaving a few not moving to get in the way of the switching operators and to make them a little more challenging, I like to move traffic over the railway.
To manage all of this, did you develop some sort of timetable or schedule, or?
Not really. I just looked at the natural flow of cars. I, in fact, have two different operating sequences that I can employ. I found the current one a little more interesting because it made this division point much busier. But no, I reflect on a railway. It moves cars. Trains are just a mechanism to aggregate those together and pull them down the line.
So they're all extras in a sense?
They're all extras. We run with a notional sequence, but there's no timetable and there's no fast clock.
Okay. And when you look at all of your, it looks like you have a car card system that you.
Yes, what I have to do is basically move all the way bills. Those that were layovers probably go into the process box. Those that were dropped off, some will become layovers. Some I may immediately switch to processing.
What do you mean? What do you mean by processing?
Processing means that they have to be dealt with in the current session.
Okay.
Which either means it's a pull, or it may mean simply this was a car that couldn't be delivered in the last session because the delivery point was full.
Yeah.
So it remains a process.
Oh, okay.
Or it may be a car that's transitioning from one train to another.
Ah, okay.
So there's some of that activity. So I have to, as I say, I need to flip the way bills and get them assigned properly. For all the open cars, I make sure the appropriate loads are in the car, which is just adds to my sense of realism, and often it helps the operators understand where that car is really going.
Can you tell me a little bit about your history in model railroading? How do you get started?
I got started, I was 6 years old. I got an American Flyer S-gauge oval.
Yes.
Ran that happily for a number of years, bought a couple of switches. About 6 years later, I was living in England, and I got a Hornby double set, which again I played with for a number of years, brought it back to Canada, then kind of lost interest in model railroading for a couple of decades. Got into career and family and housing and looking after those sorts of activities. About 30 years ago, I was visiting my parents, and my mother handed me back the box with the Hornby set in it and said, "Get this out of my house." So I brought it back to Ottawa, set it up. There were a number of issues why I didn't continue with that particular model railway, but I was hooked again. And so I built a small layout in my previous house. We moved in here about 28 years ago. I built the small railway in here. It has slowly grown. About 6 years ago, I determined that my wife's pottery studio was way too small. I therefore remodeled the basement, moved her studio into where I had my trains, expanded my trains into where she had the studio, and because I was giving up a certain amount of real estate, chose to double deck it to preserve the running distance.
So, space-wise in the house, how much space does your railroad take up, roughly?
It's in 24 by 11 feet.
That's incredible. So when you've gone to a double-level layout with a helix in it, you're gaining a lot of railroad.
You're gaining almost twice as much visible railroad, and you're gaining more than twice as much in terms of running distance, because the helix provides about 85 feet of running distance.
What other sort of methods did you use to extend your length in your tracks?
I've got another hidden loop under the peninsula that we'll visit later.
Yeah.
That adds about 25 feet of running distance between two cities which otherwise are quite close together physically. So again, it just makes sure that a train switching in town C isn't backing into towns B and D.
I know on a previous layout tour that I did with Michel Boucher, he had the similar technique.
And that's where I got the idea from.
That brings up a very interesting point. You know, when we all start into model railroading, there is a community of model railroaders around that you never get to do everything all by yourself. Can you tell me about how you got involved in the railroad community and how that helped you?
I got involved with the OVAR group about 20 years ago, which is a local it's the Ottawa Valley Association of Railways. There's a lot of modeler there. There's also many other interest groups within the railroading community.
Yeah.
So I got involved with that operating group, started to reach out, make contact with other model railroaders, started to get involved with other operating groups. And certainly it's my experience with these various groups that introduced me to many of the concepts which I've introduced here. There were some concepts that were just not appropriate for me, and I enjoy operating on them, but I don't employ them. Others were just natural fits to bring in here.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks very much for having me over here today. What I'd like to do next, I guess, is have you take us through your railroad from point to point, having a look at some of the features of it, and then maybe later after that we'll run some trains.
Okay, shall we go?
Yeah.